record. Welcome to the Shields topic number two call, and I'll hand it over to Sarah and her colleagues from ASTP-ONC. They want to give us an update on what's going on their end. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Ricky. Um, I have, let's see, it looks like two colleagues here on the call with me, Molly and Keith, and I'm going to invite them to chime in whenever whenever they like, and I'll pass it to them when there's questions that I know that they're best suited to answer. Um, Stay in this ASTP/ONC update. We'll start with some what's new at our agency. We'll talk about the report to Congress that we delivered last December and just got posted on GovInfo, and it is on lab data standards and interoperability. And I'm very excited that many of the SMEs that contributed to the development of the report are here on the line today. So that's very exciting. Um, We'll talk about USCDI. Keith's going to walk through some of our certified health IT testing information and tools, just a high overview primer. I know many people don't spend a lot of time on those parts of our resources, and I wanted to make sure that you were refreshed on where they're available in case you had questions. And then we'll have time for discussion. All right, before I dive in, can everyone hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Yes.
Beautiful. All right. First and foremost, we are welcoming Dr. Tom Keene as our new Assistant Secretary for Technology Policy and National Coordinator. Um, Dr. Keene has been with us for a few months now, and maybe you've gotten a chance to hear him speak. There's some recordings of those on our healthit.gov, and also a biography for him on our website if you want to get to know more about him. And what else have we been up to? In July, we released USCDI version 6. I just mentioned that our report to Congress on standards for laboratory data has now been posted publicly. We did submit that to Congress back in December, and it's just recently been posted. Along with the posting of that, we published a blog about our reports. And also, we've got some other great blogs out there that we've really released recently that talk about some of our activities. So, encouraging y'all to go over to healthit.gov and look at some blog posts. All right. The other thing that got released this summer was our updated standards version advancement process for 2025 was released in June. So this is the mechanism in which health IT developers can voluntarily update to newer standards. And so this most recent release includes USCDI version 5. And so the timing is such that as of August, health IT developers could voluntarily update to USCDI version 5. And then if you want to see, if you're curious about a list of certified health IT products that have been, we're going to turn it into a verb here, SFAPed to newer versions of standards. I have a link here in the slides that will take you there, and I'll share the slides after the presentation. All right. Our much anticipated report to Congress. I've been so excited to talk about this since December. So a little bit of building of excitement about this. And speaking of been a long time coming, this report was required of ASD ONC back in 2023 with the Appropriations Act. And it asked us to look at the use of data standards for laboratory ordering and reporting, look at public health data systems and the use of laboratory data, specifically looking at some demographic data and the flow of that. And so we dug in to that task with a number of subject matter experts informing us along the way. And so our approach was to think about all the different ways that laboratory data moves across the ecosystem, the different types of moves that laboratory data has. I just realized that, I'm sorry, I realized my camera's not working. I will fix that later. I'm going to keep going. Sorry, I thought my face was on camera. Apologies. Oh, Julia has her hand up. Julia, you want to hop in?
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the starting point of the scope of this effort, because one of the things we talk about in SHIELD is things from when the laboratory test is developed and approved, and that's obviously upstream of step one here. So I'm just curious as to if you went into that part of the lab data chain or not, and maybe that's somewhere else in the presentation. So I apologize for interrupting if so.
No, it's a really good question. When we were thinking about the lab data journey, we started with the orientation of an order from a patient, but that is a crucial point. And so when I get to what I'm calling the core of the laboratory data journey, I have another diagram that puts the IVD manufacturer into the picture, and to think about that piece and the creation of both the lab test and the communication of what standards should be used for that lab test. It's hard to find where is your step one, because there's some cycles, some cyclical relationships here, but good question.
Yeah, and I think even locally at the healthcare organization, an upstream step is how is the order information sort of input into the system, and what information goes with the order to the lab, et cetera. So that's sort of an operational kind of thing, but it does have a substantial impact on the output of the lab data chain.
Yes, it does. So if you peruse the report, you'll see we set up the information in an order in which you might picture your own lab data potentially going through the system. And then at each step, we talked about what standards are available to be used, what types of regulations are out there about using standards and data, and then some of those challenges of using standards and of data being exchanged. And so yep, we could have started in many different places. We started here with orders. We do have the LOI standard. We have the EDOS standard that you may remember from years ago. We have potentially the use of LOINC. We have a ONC criteria for CPOE for order entry. Yes, and Julia's pointing out that one of the challenges that we found in our discussions with labs and providers is that there's a mail and phone and paper and fax still being used for orders. It's difficult to use standards because there's almost innumerable permutations of different panels. There's some work being done on how we might approach that complexity, which is wonderful. And then, looking specifically at demographic data that there's lots of evidence that incomplete demographic data comes through in orders, and that presents challenges with both the performance of the testing and the reporting of the results downstream. I'm going to continue with this these ecosystem journey pieces of the report, but I'll just let you know that I'll do these kind of high level and quickly because this is an audience that knows this very intimately, and we'll spend more time on the possibilities for future at the end. And I want to leave time for discussion. So the core, I didn't want to call this the middle because you're right, this could start in so many different places, but this is the core of the laboratory journey. This is what's happening within the lab. We've got our manufacturers of the tests. We've got a potential link to some mapping guidance, some of the work that SHIELD is working on. We have the complexity of this information going into the lab information systems and the laboratories that sit many different places, sometimes within provider facilities, sometimes not, sometimes related to public health agencies, sometimes not. Labs that sit a lot of different places. We have lots of standards to use, but lots of complexity with adopting those standards, and lack of incentives to and support to implement those complex standards. Lots of challenges. Right, and then the destination of this laboratory data. Again, there could be a lot more arrows on this particular diagram, but to make a pretty picture, we can think about the kind of a star picture here with the information the results coming out of a laboratory information system. And this is a place where there is regulation and incentives, sometimes on the, in this case, the catchers of this data, but not always, as Mickey used to say, the pitchers of this data, the throwers of this data. And that presents several challenges for laboratories. Not only are there lots of different standards, there's lots of different capabilities of those catchers, and laboratories are faced with the burden of different catchers being in different places in terms of technical needs. And then the challenges that we saw in orders and in the core of the journey also contribute to data quality issues. When it's hard to implement standards, what you get is data out of the system that is missing critical information to for it to be standardized. All right, but there's some possibilities for the future that we'd like to think about. One is leveraging the existing certification program. Starting with something that's already in place, it can be expanded to include both pitchers and catchers of that data. The other possibility that we discuss in the report, and we discuss it because part of the development of this report was a partnership with sister agencies looking at health laboratory data interoperability. And so one of the things that was talked about was incentivizing or requiring ONC certified health IT for HHS funded projects. And there's some examples already happening of that across HHS. There's opportunities to modernize public health technologies and the use of standards and incentivizing the use of standards. And there's some models of incentive programs, of course, from the past that we can look at, like CMS's Promoting Interoperability program that we can look to when we're thinking about how we might spread out those incentives across the laboratory ecosystem. And then there's opportunities to enhance standards, data quality, and nationwide exchange. So we can support standards development and reward the accurate use of standards, improving quality in that way. That goes hand in hand with the work that SHIELD is doing here together. And we can promote participation in nationwide exchange through TEFCA. Overall, we found some similar challenges across the ecosystem, even though the ecosystem is very complex. So lack of incentives, and yet the work that needs to be done is resource heavy. Complexity in the standards and applying the standards, and people using different standards and alignment there. And also lack of available training and support to do this difficult work. We've got talking about USCDI coming up next, but let me pause here for questions and discussion. I'll toss it to Julia.
Yeah, so I was wondering, does ONC have access to any kind of like audit data or test data about the success of these exchanges in the industry? Because I think that your authority would allow you to do some kind of surveillance of that or ask people to even voluntarily give you information about that, which may be helpful in figuring out sort of what the primary gaps to close would be to start with.
Certainly, it would be a very powerful lever. We do not have that data right now, but I'm going to ask Molly to chime in on the authority piece because she has the bigger picture there.
Yeah, I think that's a really great suggestion. Like Sarah mentioned, we don't have consistent access to that information, but I think that's a really great flag for me to bring to our data analysis branch. So Julie, if you have some additional thoughts or details on that, feel free to send those our way. I think that's a good thing for us to bring and think about how we might be able to collect that.
I would even say maybe it would be better if folks from Shield put something like that together as opposed to me. So I'll sort of push that back at Ricky and Andrea to think about it. Can we find time to put
We can put it on the
them
steering
in?
committee agenda and make that request that way.
Okay, cool. It'll be much more informed if everyone is involved.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Alana.
Hi, by the way, hi, Sarah. Good to
Hi,
see you.
Lana. Good to see you.
Thank you. I just, not really a question, but just comments. I just wanted to say that the report reads very well for someone like me who is not a laboratorian. So I think it's really great for Congress, for folks who don't specialize in this industry to get a great grasp of what is happening. And I love the way it's written to follow the data and to help them understand the challenges at each step of the way. So I'm excited about just that and that's the key. They got to understand it before they can, make decisions on it. So just wanted to say kudos for a well-written report and looking forward to the changes, and how it will help, you know, move things forward. So thank you all.
Thanks, Alana. Big shout out to all the help that I had that are on the call right now. Andrea and Ricky and Steve. And then also on the call, we have some of our experts that were interviewed by Andrea and Ricky to inform the writing of the report. We've got Jenna here. We've got Isa was not an official interviewee, but provided us her Loink knowledge. Just lots of people contributed to the understanding of the complexities so that we could break it down for the audience of needed for a report to Congress.
Kareem, go ahead.
Hello. Sorry if it's a bit noisy where I am. Hi. Really great presentation. Thanks. I'm just looking on the right-hand side, accurate use of standards and terminology harmonization. We totally share your pain in the UK implementation, particularly in lab reporting. The translation stuff that's going on with loink to loink ontology to interoperate with SNOMED, that's amazing. That's one step forward. That really helps us out. I'm sure you're speaking to Isa, about all this stuff anyway. But the terminologies are huge, and loink is massive. And even with the conversions, there is a bit of a floodgate to variance and coding. There's different styles that you can do it. And if you're using HL7, then that's even further kind of post-coordinating terminology into different data items in there in a different way. Like the stuff we've been doing with the European lot at the moment, they've got a lab semantic working group, and you can just see immediately the different countries, how they're doing things differently. So I'm just hoping that we can, keep mobilizing this kind of globally and working with, Isa and Regan Streif and SNOMED International to come up with, more robust implementation guides that not necessarily mandate, but have recommended kind of strategies for labs, to code. And then there's the whole issue of getting lab terminology, local terminology mapped across, if you have that problem too. We've got that in the UK, mapped across to the interoperable standards, which is a separate challenge as well. And yeah, I don't know if I asked any questions there. I think I just went on a spiel. Sorry.
No, I appreciate it. It brings to mind something that is in the report that we heard, which is moving that mapping upstream closer to or at an activity related to the livid specification, and where the mapping comes with the IVD manufacturer information, having all of that connected. That's something that was discussed in the development of this report. Wondering if anyone wants to chime in on that approach.
Well, hey, this is Evan Foreman from ADOM. I wanted to make a similar point to Kareem about, the harmonization of terminology as well as just the harmonization of laboratory results between, and methodologies and the equipment you may have. Like this is all, as far as interoperability goes, this is, kind of dovetails with all of this stuff and is really important. I mean, I can only speak from the US side of this thing, but I feel like this kind of goes along globally. So I appreciate you making that point, Green.
Mhm. Yeah, and another thing that was an interesting piece, an informative piece of developing the report and the recommendations was we got an early look at what's now become that Steve and Charlie helped us with the what's now become the Peaky pipeline, looking at data quality. We got a chunk of data to look at, and the use of data standards in it, and the application of codes. And what was striking is that it's using codes is, to Kareem's point, there's so many, but even for the most utilized parts of our system, using codes is hard. I think that there was even one organization that used the CBC panel code, LOINC code, for every single result that they had. And that was eye-opening. It's showing us that it's not just like the tail end of like really hard things to map, even though there are definitely things that are really hard to map. Like even those most used, most frequently occurring labs, that's hard too. It's hard across the board.
Yeah, Sarah, it's a great point. I mean, it's kind of getting beyond encoding terms to standards like LOINC, beyond viewing that as a checkbox exercise, because that's kind of what we saw in some of the real world data, right? And I do agree that pushing upstream as far as we can to align with standards will go a long way to preventing the kind of the downstream chaos that we see sometimes, right?
So, Sarah, it's Matt Allison request. You know, one of the things that catches everyone's attention, at least on my side of that, the commercial lab, incentive programs, unsurprisingly, right? So with that, it's an interesting space that we're in, and I know this is the details here probably aren't known, or even if they were, hard to talk about. But is there any recommendations that you have where we have competing issues where, clearly there's investment that's needed in healthcare IT and interop, but at the same time, labs are facing pretty large scale cuts in reimbursement, which makes some of those investments even more difficult than usual. Is there any recommendations you would have on how we can highlight those facts to others?
We're hoping we captured those challenges and got in this opportunity to highlight it in this report to Congress. And Molly, I'm going to tag you in again. And Molly, I'm sorry, I realized I didn't introduce you. Will you introduce yourself as I tag you in again to answer, how do we get the attention on this need?
A great question. And hi, all. Sorry, I was also multitasking. and eating some lunch, so apologies. My name is Molly Prado. I'm the Principal Deputy Director for the Office of Standard Certification and Analysis, previously known as OTEC. But I do appreciate the kind of need for greater attention on this. As we have the opportunity for public comments on, any future rulemaking activities or other events, we really welcome the written support there and just heightened attention on this. And then the other opportunity that clearly you all are already engaged with is working through standard development organizations and continuing to work through HL7 and making sure that we're staying plugged into all of those updates. And if I missed part of that question because I was also trying to make sure that I didn't have food in my face before going on camera, please let me know.
The other thing that doesn't speak directly to those challenges, but is one of our mechanisms that we get public feedback is through our development of USCDI data elements and our open feedback periods on those. It doesn't directly relate to the challenges of incentivizing commercial labs, but it is a place to talk about what data elements are needed for exchange. So let me do my high-level quick review of what's going on with USCDI and see if there's some places that we can kind of poke at USCDI to get more answers to your question. All right. Okay, so our core US core data for interoperability is our core set, our minimum data set, and it continues to be this baseline for the use of data for patient care and patient access to the data. And USCDI, how do you know, how do we know what the baseline should be? Well, it updates every year in a predictable cadence. And we have a collaborative public process to develop the USCDI data elements. We have 2 public feedback periods per year for USCDI. So we develop a draft version of USCDI. We ask for public feedback. We then put out the final. We ask for public feedback, which then informs the next draft. So we just released USCDI version 6. This is the final version. Final versions generally get released in July, like this one was. And there are 6 new data elements, noting that one of the data elements, unique device identifier, we're calling it new because it was significantly modified. It was previously UDI for implantable devices, and now it's UDI, no qualifier after it, just UDI. All right, so where are we in this cycle? We're in September, which means there's still several weeks in our public submission period to go on to our healthit.gov, to the USCDI website, look at draft or final V6 and click on data elements. You can leave feedback on those data element pages about your support for the data element, suggestions for revisions for the data element, or as you look at the set of data elements that we have in USCDI and you see the need for new data elements, you can submit new suggestions in the on deck data element form. We also have visible all the other data elements that people have previously suggested in buckets of level of applicability to the broad use cases and maturity. And so we have those in buckets of levels 0, 1, and 2. So go ahead and take a look at what other data elements have been submitted by other people. And if you see one missing, submit your own. And stay tuned for January of the coming year for the release of draft version 7. As I've been talking about how USCDI is for the floor or the baseline set, knowing that there are many other use cases beyond what applies to the floor baseline set. And that led to the development of USCDI Plus. These are specific domain focused initiatives to create data element sets that go beyond USCDI. Some of the USCDI Plus domains that we have in progress include cancer, maternal health, behavioral health, public health, and quality. And that's what I have on USCDI. Oh, and Julia has her hand raised. Let's turn it to you, Julia.
Yeah, I'm wondering, so I think if you're not a savvy person, you might not connect the USCDI requirements with all the investments that ASTP and ONC have made in building more formal data models in FHIR in the, US core. And I'm wondering, is there an appetite at ASTP to start referencing basically, I'll call them de facto models in FHIR resources and profiles that are in US core more directly in USCDI plus and USCDI, because one of the things that we've seen is the lack of the well-structured metadata means people can't validate lab information and input that into their system, and maybe pointing towards something that's a little more comprehensive in terms of how to format and manner that data would make us have some forward-moving gains.
That's a great question. Ricky, do you want to answer that question, or you want me to jump in and then turn to you?
Well, I was just gonna say it'd be nice if the USCDI itself would be, more of a model versus pointing to FHIR, which is one interpretation of how to, represent that in one HL7 product. And there are others like CDA and V2. And as you know, in the lab space, V2 is much more prevalent. So it's, yeah, I would, and Sarah knows this. I've asked for, a more explicit modeling of each of those USCDI data elements for a while.
And Ricky, I want a model. I'm not so much married to pointing to FHIR. It's just that FHIR already exists and supported by his TPONC. So that could be like one step they could take.
Yeah, I just have a problem with, the FHIR core people take what's written in USCDI and they model it with their FHIR lens on it. And the way they model it might not work exactly the same for CDA or V2. And so it'd be nicer to have, the USCDI as a starting point with the requirements that HL7 can then take and properly put into their respective HL product families.
I don't disagree with you.
I wish I have a different diagram, but it's not it hasn't been made pretty by our graphics people yet, so I didn't put it in here because I am not a graphics person. But it shows the big picture relationship between USCDI data elements and like how do we use those as the minimum data set? Well, we put into our criteria that you need to be able to exchange USCDI using FHIR US Core and CCDA, and then those are developed to exchange the USCDI data elements. Julie and Ricky, that's giving some other people the background in case you're jumping into this and haven't thought about how USCDI gets turned into a certified health IT requirement recently. That's just the background context. But to get to your question, it's an interesting balance that we have where we create these data elements and say this is what you need to be capable of exchanging, and we don't go so far as to modeling it. We have the modeling driven by the U.S. realm, the U.S. Core and CCDA work groups, and what that does is puts us as the definer of the data elements, but what the exchange specification looks like, the model of those data elements in the space of the consensus-driven standards development, which I also think is a really crucial part of having a baseline floor for certification, and part of having a way to do it that people can agree on and support, and that connection and that relationship between the data elements and then the standards development by the community, I think is crucial to the work that we do, but also noting that it's maybe not generalizable past the modeling that's done in that for US Core and CCDA, and a potential next step is to take that modeling and surface it in a way that could be more generalizable to and not exchange standard specific. All right, related to these relationships, just briefly, because I think it will spur some additional discussion and conversation. I'd love to turn it over to Keith for a moment to give you an overview of where you can find the details about our certification program testing tools. And Keith, I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, I'll start with I'll go on camera for a second because I'm usually get the side profile, but look at my laptop for a second and just say hi. I'm Keith Carlson. I work in the certification and testing division, here at ASTP ONC, specifically on a lot of our testing tools. And I think I'll share my screen and I'll just, in the time we have here, just kind of quickly go over where more information can be found on our website, and where you can find some of these, the tools that test USCDI and kind of understand where that's all laid out. Please feel free to interrupt if folks have questions or if I'm getting off topic here. Hopefully you see my screen with just the healthit.gov.
Yep, we do.
Front page. Awesome. So if you go, you just got to go to the topics page, and then we have our certification of health IT as a spotlighted topic here. And then, you've got these two yellow buttons up here where you can look at a program overview PDF, as a thing to look at for more in-depth background on our certification program. But I think one of the key things, if you click on this Learn More button here, you get taken to our certification space with a bunch more sub pages on the left here. And I think one of the things for this group in terms of tools and like what tests USCDI, one of the pages we're going to be most interested here is this conformance methods page, which I will okay, yeah, so you go to conformance methods and then you go to conformance test tools. I will drop this exact page in the chat for people. But I did want to just demo how to navigate the website a little bit so you can see where to get to other stuff. But yeah, we can, this is where you can see kind of, like again, if we're interested here in US CDI, you can just search for US CDI and start to see, based on a base standard under test here in the rightmost column, we have our what we call certification criteria that reference the standard, and then the tool that tests the standard through that certification criteria. For example, this one is a specific fire implementation of US CDI, like the conversation we just had about, kind of, representing US CDI on fire. That's through the US Core Fire Implementation Guide, and the Inferno framework is the test tool for that. And then there are other ones here for, you know, HL7 CDA and the test tools for that, and all the different range of certification criteria that those are referenced through. I know certification criteria might be a technical term over some people's head who are less familiar with the program, but hopefully this is a way to still see kind of a tool link you can go click on to get a little bit more information. I know, do you want me to, Sarah, to go over, you had mentioned certification companion guides. Is that something to go over too, you think? Or I can pause here if hopefully this is making sense for folks. I think for a crash course, this is hopefully a good place to start.
Let's go to the CCG, just like where you can find them. In the work that I know that Shield is doing, there's been some discussion about, okay, what is certified health IT actually have to do? So they have to exchange US CDI data elements. What does that mean? What do they have to prove to be certified, so that the work that Shield is doing can line up with what certified health IT is doing, because those connections between the pitchers and the catchers are so important. So yeah, Keith, if you could click over to where those are. This is just because I know that not everyone is eat, sleeping, and breathing this particular information, but questions are coming up, and I wanted you to get a chance to get a feel of the shortcuts to these tools and to that information. Of course, we're always here for you to ping if you have questions, but this is where this information lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally go over that quickly. Because yeah, that's just Sarah's really getting at our certification criteria, these specific, like this is a regulatory reference, and it's Title 45 of the Code of Federal Regulations. At this section, we have different sections where we kind of lay out the technical requirements. And so they're called certification criteria, and you can see here there's a button here on the left for that. And now I have to battle with the bar at the top here. 1 second. Okay, should be seeing my browser again still.
Yeah, we see your email.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thank you. That looks like browser. Okay, yeah, so we've got this certification criteria page, and you can go into kind of the conformance methods here. If you click on this, this is another main anchor page I'll put in chat for people. And so like this is where there's background information throughout here, but all of the different certification criteria, and we have what are called certification companion guides for each of these. Let me go ahead and just link one back to you saw on the previous page I was looking at 170315 G10, and so here is that certification criterion, and there's a guide for that. You can click here. And this is where we just kind of gather in one place, like the regulatory text for this. This gets into the really, so talking about the requirements for the what the technology needs to do to meet this requirement. These are the very terse kind of deeply technical requirements in the regulation text, and we list out all the standards that are referenced. US CDI is in here, and it's adopted through it's exchanged to the Fire US Core Implementation Guide for G10. And then we have we provide different clarifications down further on the page. I think also another thing I'll just call out is the test procedure. There's a tab up on each of these pages where you can see it's just kind of a different wording of the regulatory text requirements, just in like more of a, you know, a procedure that needs to be followed, like a, what a health IT developer needs to demonstrate for each of these different paragraphs. These are what our testing labs kind of follow, and what our testing tools implement as they follow these test procedures and kind of, guide through testing a technology to these requirements. So that was a lot. I'm going to go ahead and pause. This is all whirlwind. Are folks still with me, or any questions at this point?
We're still here.
So yeah, I mean, we can, encourage folks on that link I sent with the table. You can go through and look at all of our, we have a ton of certification criteria. You can map it back to, if you see, like, you're curious about the direct testing tool and you see that these are the criteria that are tested through this tool, you can go back to that main page. And if you want to see more details on what the B1, like this transitions of care reg text is, regulation text is, and the test procedure for it, you can go back to that previous page and find it on the table, and go to the certification companion guide.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Does that also include like the NIST tools for the older, promoting interoperability? Yeah, down there.
I
That one
think,
is CDA, but there's
yeah.
probably maybe the old LRI in there somewhere, or the old ELR for the public health things. I don't know if you cover
Yeah, they're
those.
down here. Yep, the
Okay,
public health
all right,
testing suites.
perfect,
Yes.
awesome, thanks.
Yeah, of course.
There's ELR at the bottom of the screen for folks.
That was the last topic we had, so let's just open it up for discussion.
There was a lot in the chat, and I know some people had to drop, but yeah, anyone who wants to ask questions, feel free to do so.
This is Stan. I'd just like to go back to something that was said earlier and just reinforce what Ricky said. It's important to distinguish, if you will, models of reality or models of information versus data exchange standards. The models of medicine, if you will, the models that are grounded in what's happening in the real world, then can be used to generate FHIR or CDA templates, or FHIR profile, CDA templates, or other kinds of artifacts, and so they last longer and are evolve more slowly than data exchange standards. And so I think it's important, and I'm just saying things that we've said a lot of times, in the Clinical Information Modeling Initiative within HL7. And there are activities going on looking at, for instance, information models for vital signs that are independent of any of the exchange standards, FHIR or version 2 or CDA. But then you generate those artifacts because that's what people need when they're programming. But it's important to distinguish the information models from the exchange standards, and there's a need for both. But I think that's just an important distinction to remember as we plan.
A good point, Stan, and I'm wondering from the Shield community here if there might be appetite to take a look at the modeling work that y'all did, and I think you did look at lab and look at the lab data elements that we have in USCDI and use the collective expertise here to look at what a lab data model that fills that gap that the USCDI data elements are not doing, where there's not a model there. I wonder if this community might propose something for lab that we could use as a jumping off point.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too that you guys are both bringing up, because it also depends where in the laboratory workflow the content is used, because some of the things listed in USCDI are modeled differently or used differently in different parts of the workflows, like the specimen condition acceptability. There's clear regs on, condition, and then on, if it's on an order, it might be rejected on the order side and used for cancellation. And there aren't even any results done because you can't analyze a clotted specimen, for example. But I know that there's folks, we've been talking in O&O about, creating observations and other things. Certainly on the results reporting side, that might be possible if something is reported and that's included for the interpretation, if it's a hemolyzed specimen or, those types of things. So one thing a lot of the standards don't address is where in the workflow things are used. And then of course, each laboratory defines their panels and things. And so that impacts too, with different ones, modeling the content differently of what's included, excluded, or just even different answers and how they structure it in their LIS and EHR that impacts like mapping to link codes for reporting to ELR, for example. So there's a lot of impacts that happen even before you get to the point of what Stan's talking about. So it's something to kind of take in consideration. But I see Eric, your hand's up too.
Yeah, just and I know, Sarah, I don't know how much you can say or on this, but like, what do you feel like might be like, where do we go from here, or where does this report, how does this change things? So like, might we see on the ASTP side, might we see lab-related certification criteria in a future HTI, public, rule or whatever, or again, I think we've talked on some of the Shield calls about other levers which would come from other agencies like CMS or such that might look at how they could incentivize adoption of some of the standards. I mean, do you have it? Can you speak at all to like next steps or where we might go from here?
Yeah, one thing that you can do is now that it's posted, in any federal comment that you are making suggestions on what an agency might do related to health data standards and laboratory data, you could reference the report and to point to a summary of the complexities and possible solutions, and then build upon it. So that's one way to use how we've posted the report. We wrote it so that our sister agencies were involved and can also leverage the report. But those pieces of how different agencies are working together are not rooms I'm in, so I don't have any more particular information for you on that.
Thanks, guys. And I want to point out we're like 4 minutes over, so people probably have to drop, but we really appreciate you being able to update us on that. And it was perfect timing with the report coming out. So I'm excited you could talk about that too. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to everybody else on the All Shield call. I'll get this recording posted. And if you can share your slides with me so I can post them, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. Really enjoyed the discussion.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.